This is, I don't know how to respond to that.
That's good.
Thank you for your service.
It was. Oh
Slaves
my
built a
gosh.
lot of the free world. So.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Sorry.
We're never going to get through this.
We're not. Okay, so we met recently.
Yes.
You've been in Oklahoma for how long now?
Since the middle of February.
Okay.
So
And
not
how
very
did
long.
you get? And you're from New York,
Originally,
but like not New York. When people say New York,
yeah,
you're not from New York.
I graduated
You're from,
high
like-
school from upstate New York, a place
Yeah.
called Canandaigua. It's near Rochester. So I lived in the area
It's
for
like Boonies, New York.
total boonies. We had trees and some hills, some lakes.
Guns.
Yeah, guns rough everywhere.
Yeah, right.
Like, it's your christening, you know. Here's some water. Here's a rifle.
There you go.
Yeah.
Amen. Okay, so how'd you end up here? Soper.
Soper.
Which,
Soper.
I mean, a lot of people here don't even know where Soper is.
They think it's sulfur.
Yes.
Soper, Oklahoma. Well, I guess we have to go back to
All right.
2016. I was in graduate school, and I went to graduate school in Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies in Washington, D.C. And on my first day there, I met a guy named Clay Padgett, who was so polite and so nice and so humble that I literally thought he was just full of crap. I did not trust this guy because he was so genuine.
Right.
And
You're not real.
no one is this nice, especially coming from, I was working overseas. I'd been in like the Middle East for 3.5 years,
Right.
and I was in New York before that. So I just had like this tinge of like doubt of everybody. Everyone is out to like get
Distrust.
me. Everyone's out
This
to.
guy's asking nice.
Yeah, everyone's out to
acting
get me.
nice. He must want money.
Exactly. What's your angle? And so when I meet Clay, and I'm like, something's wrong with this, and it turns out that he actually is just that genuine, and we ended up becoming friends. And throughout our scholastic career, we began talking more and more about where we're going afterwards. And his goal was always to come back to Oklahoma, where he was, where he'd been living for the past, living, right? He's actually a retired Army officer, and so he was in the military for 22 years, which took him all over. But his roots are in Oklahoma, and so he wanted to come back. And he wanted to come back and teach. He teach 5th grade science is what he's doing now. But he'd always had this idea of continuing his public service, and which he was thinking the best way he could do is as a congressman. U.S. congressman representing the Oklahoma 2nd Congressional District. And so with the way things evolved after the 2016 election, and just seeing the lack of moral character and leaders, and the lack of direction, and the incivility, he decided that 2018 was going to be the year that he ran. And
It was a catalytic year for a lot of people, I think.
real big motivator.
Yeah.
A lot of political nihilists in
Sure.
2015 and 2016. Everyone's like, well, now's the time.
Absolutely, I can vouch for that.
And so, and so he came down here, and he and I had grown as friends, and he'd always wanted me to come down and help him with his campaign. And so,
So you're like, screw that, I'm getting on a boat.
yeah. And so I said, no, Clay, you know what a really good idea is, though? I'm going to row across the ocean in a little rowboat.
I'm busy. I'm busy that day. I'm going to be in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah. And so that's it.
So you made up a reason to go on a trip to.
I mean, like, as soon as I met Clay, I was like, this is going nowhere. Like, I'm going to
This
go.
guy gives
I'm
me
going
the heebie-jeebies.
I'm going to slowly row a boat across the ocean.
Okay, so let's side note there since we're there. You rowed a boat across the ocean.
So I guess
Not
we have
alone.
Yeah, not alone. Though some people do it alone. All right, going back in time again. It's 2016, and about the same time I met Clay. Just before then, I had met a friend who ended up being my future roommate in Washington, D.C., because nobody lives alone in D.C. because no one can afford to.
I was going to say, no one can afford to, right?
And he told me when we first met, and he's like, I was actually riding a motorcycle around Africa. I'd gotten kicked out of Syria, and so I was in Africa, and I met him.
Don't spoil it. We'll do. You know, we're kind of going Tarantino.
We're going way back in time.
All right.
So I met
come
this
back
guy,
to
and he told
Africa.
me about this thing. Talk about Africa later. He told me about this thing. I was going to row this boat across this ocean. I'm this team rowing a boat across the ocean. I go, look, I don't know what this is or what you're talking about. This sounds like a terrible idea.
Like, in what conversation?
Get me in.
Like, what's the context that comes up in? Like, what are you doing this Saturday? Well, now that you ask,
I don't know. I just
looking for a fourth man for my expedition across the ocean.
I guess we were just like having like one-uppers, you know?
Oh, right.
Like, well, I did this. Well, I did this. Well, I'm doing this. Well, I'm doing this.
Well, looks like I'm joining you.
Yeah, and that's what I said. I was like, well, I don't know anything about this stupid boat race, but you better break someone's kneecap so I can get on. And like, it was a joke. And then, you know, a month later or 2 months later, we're roommates. And then a month later after that, he sits me down over a whiskey and a cigar, and he's like, so Phil,
you remember that? You remember that kneecap comment?
Someone got their kneecap broken. He's like, he's just like, how do you feel about being the fourth member of Team Carbon Zerow and rowing across the Atlantic? And it took me all about like 3 seconds. I think I was kind of like this like, this pensive, like, yes, you know, like, that's all it took. And then I agreed to something I had no idea what kind of logistical, financial, physical obligations were going to ensue after that. The time commitment alone. And then I was just, yes.
So like time and prep for this thing. Like
2
what
years.
was,
2 years.
2 years.
2 years of prep, man.
And that's like training. That's, what does that mean? 2 years of prep.
I mean,
to get in a boat and.
So I came in. I was the last guy to join.
Yeah.
This is started by a guy named Kyle Smith. He's a PhD student up in Scotland. Real smart kid. And he recruited Brian way back like 10 years ago when they were in undergrad together. They said, wouldn't this be crazy? I saw this when I was watching Trans World Sport when I was a kid, and I've always just thought it would be incredible to row across the ocean. He told Brian about it. Brian, being the glutton for punishment that he is, was like, I'm in. They asked James, who was a rower on his crew team in college, was like, sure, it doesn't seem like it could be that hard. And then and I was the fourth guy.
I probably rode that far.
Yeah, probably. No big deal. How big are the waves?
Right.
So this all happened back in 2015, the end of 2015.
Okay.
So the 2015 race ended, I can't remember exactly. Anyways, it ended, and then they bought the boat from a guy in La Gomera, or in Antigua, and then got it shipped, and then it was all the prep. And it's just a skeleton boat. You know, there's some equipment on it, the navigation equipment, and some rudimentary pieces of equipment.
How big is the boat?
It's 9 meters long.
Okay. And it has like a small cabin, right?
2 small cabins.
2 small.
It's one in the front, one in the back. The back one's smaller. It's where all the gear is. Well, there's gear in both, but it's got all the navigation equipment. It's got all the auto helm to steer the boat, which I'll get into that later. And then it's got a lot of the food. The front cabin's much longer. You can lay down, fully in the front cabin.
One person can lay down in it. And
yeah. You can fit 2 people in both cabins. You're just real cozy.
Yeah,
it's a real cozy existence.
Buddies.
So yeah, they asked me to join, and I just accepted. And so this started in 2015, the idea. They bought the boat. It's 2016 October, and I'm over in the UK with Brian and James, or James and Kyle, and looking at the boat, seeing the boat for the first time, kind of like getting a feel for what the actual race is.
Right.
I had not even seen like a YouTube video of this yet. I was just kind of like, yeah, I'll do that. It can't be that hard. And now with
You're
all
just the extra pair of arms.
yeah, right.
You guys take care of the details.
I'm just
let
the
me know
dumb
when.
muscle. Yeah, I'm just the dumb muscle. But it starts to get into the ideas of like, okay, now we need to like start thinking about all the logistics that go into it, which is like food. You know how much food you're gonna need for this? How are you gonna make water? We need a water maker. Like, what equipment do we need? What personal equipment do we need? Like, what kind of training do we need? How do we be compliant with the race? And so it's just like sitting down and looking at endless spreadsheets.
So like how much, do you know like poundage of food you started with?
Oh man, I probably could tell you. I don't have it off the top of my head. I mean, so it works out, we needed 60 days of food, and we needed 5,500 calories a day per person.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So we made little meal packs, and they were just yay big, and there were probably 300 of them. I don't know. It's a good ballpark. 60 divided by 3.
Or like what kind of stuff is in that?
Yeah, so it's all expedition food. It's reconstituted. So you take like boiling water, or you can take just, lukewarm water, put it in there, seal it up, and then it reconstitutes the food. And it actually isn't terrible.
Like those like military rations packs.
Yeah. It's kind of
thing?
like that. A military rations pack is considered what's called wet food,
Oh.
and we can get into this later because I actually had a real problem with the food. And it was like critical problems.
Like real bad time to be stuck in the middle of the ocean problems.
Yeah, exactly. Like to develop a food problem allergy. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
So we had tons of food. I mean. Yeah, and so I mean, these are just parts of it, right? Like you need snacks, you need to figure out how you're going to make your water. You're going to need to figure out.
How did you make water?
Well, we had a water maker. It's an Osmos C. It's called Osmos C, and what it does is it takes seawater and through force filtration and reverse osmosis and all sorts of like Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of effects and wizardry.
Right.
Space stuff. It's space stuff. It turns seawater into fresh water. We had this thing. We bought this thing. It's like 4,000 British pounds.
Some sort of desalination going on in there.
Yeah.
We don't know how. It's you push the magic button and
like sunlight comes down and turns this into fresh.
Right.
Exactly. And
the
so
little angels.
we sacrifice a small
woodland
animal.
We had to take a goat for every gallon of.
And then all of a sudden we have a drinking water.
That's a pop.
So we got this thing installed in La Gomera.
Carbon neutral when you go that direction.
Yeah. Yeah, we should get into that too.
Where is that?
La Gomera?
Yeah.
It's an island off of the west coast of Africa. It's a Spanish island. So it's
Like
actually
what country? Like where are you at in Africa?
like Mauritius? Mauritius? I think it's called
Yeah,
Mauritius. Yeah. So it's just west of there.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's so like right off the west coast of Africa there, kind of.
Is that where this always starts?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually the island that Christopher Columbus stopped off at before he went west.
Got it. Okay.
So-
So you're like you're traveling Christopher Columbus's path.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
he's
landing
such a
in
hack. He did not navigate to the Indies. All he did was just go with the trade winds and
Right.
the currents. He just went where
totally meant to do that.
he's like
totally.
Yeah, he's like best accident ever.
Right. Yeah. We'll call this India.
Yeah. Like you are now Indians. Like no. So Antigua, it's unknown if it was actually his first stop. There's a few islands that is perceived to be one of the he stopped at, but it's generally accepted that Antigua and those islands are where he landed initially.
Okay.
And that's
Washed up.
Yeah, that's where he bumped into shore and said India. Yeah.
Right.
What
Okay.
a hack.
So, length of the actual trip,
45 days.
is that normal? Like,
We did pretty good.
okay.
So
I mean, you pack food for 60 days, so I imagine it can get longer.
we wanted 40 days would have beaten the world record. If we did it in 40 days, we'd have beaten the world record.
Wow.
And we wanted to do that. Now, going back to the water maker, we left La Gomera December 14th. We got about 3 days in when we started realizing something was critically wrong. The fact that our water was briny. The fact that we were getting dehydrated. I mean, so I was a paramedic for 13 years, and I know, critical dehydration. We take our skin,
Sure, yeah.
and you let it go,
And it
and
just,
how
like,
fast it rebounds is called
yeah.
tenting. So I would pinch my skin, and my skin would just like slowly fall down, like over 5 seconds, and I go, oh. And I remember at this point, we'd been in the water for 3 days, violently sick. I mean, like everything that touches my mouth, I just puke right up. And this was my biggest fear too. Like I did not want to get so sick that like I just
Because at this
couldn't
point,
finish
you're
this.
like, it's going to be like this the entire time.
Or I just get a medevac off the boat.
you don't make
it.
Yeah.
It would have been like I'd have to call like a freighter to take me somewhere.
White flag.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a real depressing thought. Thinking A, you have to give up something that you worked so hard for,
now your
and B,
team-
you're letting your team down. Yeah, exactly. So we didn't want that. So we got 3 days into it, and I'm just like sick. James is puking. Kyle and Brian are pretty seasick, but they're not as puking as bad as I am. So I'm just like, this is the worst. And I remember poking my head out the top hatch, and I'm looking at the guys. The waves are rough. It's kind of cold out. We're all wet. And I'm like, hey, guys. And they're like, what, Phil, what? What could you possibly have for us right now? And I'm like, I'm just kind of thirsty. And they're all like, yeah, me too. Like something's really wrong here. And like, I'm surprised I didn't recognize this problem before, but we got this water maker installed a day before we left. And we ran it, we tested it in the harbor and like once more. And the water was briny, and the guy that installed it said, you just got to keep running it. You got to keep running it. It'll eventually start producing good
First
water.
10 gallons, the rest will be fine.
Yeah, right.
Jeez.
And so like that break-in period only got worse and worse and worse. It turns out we just actually had a major problem with the water maker. It's not the guy's fault, right? He didn't sell us water maker. That would fail on purpose.
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
a water maker. It takes the salt out.
Yeah, like
These guys.
screw them.
That's right.
We're gonna like really ruin their crossing. So it just ended up being a manufacturer default. And oh my God. So from that point on, we kind of said, well, can't finish the race without water. Like, what do we end up doing? So what we had was this thing called it was an emergency water maker, but called a Catadyne. And it's just this tube, this big, and it's got a lever on it, and you just pump this lever. And I actually wrote about this in my blog. And for every pump, every action of the lever you put down, it would put out like the most minuscule amount of water. It was like it was not even enough to wet the pallet. Man. You had to pump that thing for 4 hours a day to make just enough water for that day.
So each of you guys were doing it for an hour a day or something.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
Split it up.
So 4 man hours a day.
Jeez.
So that's 4 man hours that
you're
not
rowing.
You're not rowing. And so like on day 3, even though we were already getting our butts kicked by this weather, we kind of realized that our world record attempt was now out the window.
Yeah.
And now it was just surviving.
I mean, over that time, it would take 2 or 3 days at least.
It added an extra 3.5 days.
Man.
So yeah, it was, but it wasn't so.
And you're sitting there pumping water for an extra hour a day. Like, not to mention that.
It's the most monotonous thing too. You're just like, anything but this.
Anything but this.
I'd rather be doing this.
Yeah, right.
Because this is helping me get across the ocean faster.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Oh man, that's rough.
So a little bit about the boat. It's 9 meters long.
Yeah. What was the name of it?
Layla.
Layla.
We bought it. It had already done one crossing before, a near catastrophe, and so we bought it from a guy. His name was Steve, nicknamed Seasick Steve. I think it took him almost 90 days to cross. He was trying to do it as a solo, but it's a big boat, not meant for it. And he just had a real hell of a time trying to get across. And he ended up having to, Seasick
Now
Steve.
you're Seasick Phil.
I'm Seasick still. I was. By the 4th day, I recovered. So, thank you. But so. Yeah, he ended up getting help. A guy had to be brought out in a boat to help him finish the race because it just was nearly impossible. So it's 9 meters long. There's 4 of us: Kyle, James, Brian, myself. We rowed 2 people at a time. We rowed
Like one on either side, or
back? In tandem.
Oh, okay.
So guy in the front, guy in the back.
Got it.
And then we rowed for 2-hour shifts. And we went 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we didn't stop for much at all. And we were Team Carbon Zerow, it's the name of our team. And the reason why is because...
So that's not a thing. That was your guy.
What?
That was y'all's team. Like, it's not a thing for everyone to do the Carbon Zero.
No, we wanted to do it.
Got it.
And
okay.
so Kyle is, as I said earlier, he's an electrical engineer, and he's really about renewable... and sustainable resources, renewable and sustainable energy sources, solar, wind, and he understands like the plight of our globe, our world, if we don't start thinking about sustainability, if we don't start thinking about how we can, energize the world in the future. And he has this quote that he says, what motivated for him to get into this kind of field is, someone told him once, the way emerging economies decide to electrify themselves will determine the fate of the world. And so that's just driven him. And now he cares nothing more than, promoting sustainable development and sustainable energy sources.
Particularly in like developing
nations. Particularly in developing nations, yeah.
I guess, technology's ubiquitous, so he can work on anything, anywhere, and with hopes of that being, driving the what's adopted.
It's again the chicken or the egg thing, I guess, for him. He'd explain it better than I would, but like, at what point do you, promote sustainable, renewable energy sources in your own country that then propagates to developing countries, or then do you first go to the emerging countries, get them to do it first, and then come back to your country and try to fix it later? It's like.
So you guys were focused on your overall carbon footprint for this voyage.
Yeah.
But not just the voyage, right? Like
Everything leading up to it, like from the second they put the down payment on the boat. Well, actually, before the flights to it.
Man.
Yeah, I mean, so it was a huge undertaking.
So how did that go? Number one, towards your goal, and number two, how did that make it different for you guys compared to a normal voyage?
So we chose to get audited by the Carbon Trust. We reached out to the Carbon Trust, and they usually audit bigger corporations, and these corporations, get audited on their carbon footprint, and they purchase carbon credits. Sidetrack: a carbon credit is essentially like if you offset, or if you produce 1 ton of carbon, and you want to offset that with a carbon credit. You pay a company or an agency like World Land Trust, which is our charity, X amount of dollars for 1 carbon credit, and what they use that money for is to build, sustainability and emerging economies such as like recycling plants, or they do things like wetland regeneration, or they do forest protection, protecting the rainforest in Borneo type of things. So that's what a carbon credit is, because it doesn't make sense unless you explain what a carbon credit is. So
you just put money in the machine and carbon dioxide gets sucked out of the air.
Exactly. Yeah. One carbon credit, you just kill a whole bunch of people, and all of a sudden,
that's right. Ta-da! Nobody's
less carbon.
Ta-da!
That's bad. Can we edit that out?
We'll see. Sacrificing goats, killing off people for your liberal environmentalist agenda.
I know, right? I'm getting targeted.
You're hitting all of the everyone's like, I knew it.
Domestic terrorist, right? Like an eco-terrorist. Phil Van Benthem is on our podcast today. Well, all right. Now that I'm already going to jail.
All right, great.
So we got audited by Carbon Trust. They essentially counted all of our carbon, and they count things like from the stuff we buy, like life jackets. Well, what are those made of? Those are made of like materials that put carbon in the atmosphere, and it takes, shipping those materials from A to B, puts carbon in the atmosphere, and then, what's our boat made of? What's made of carbon fiber, like what's our clothing made out of, So all these things produce carbon, and we got audited on that. Now, fast forward to the end of the race, we got audited, and we just found out what our carbon footprint was. It was something like 65 tons.
Okay.
And the ridiculously sad thing about this is the 62 of those 65 tons, if I'm remembering this correctly, are from our travel alone, airfare. So
wow.
So flying is the biggest contributor to carbon.
Wow.
And we took a lot of steps to reduce our carbon footprint. Like, we didn't eat red meat for the entire year. And I think that reduced our carbon footprint by like 1 ton. Which really isn't that much.
So like less than one of your flights, or something.
Exactly. It was tiny, and so like, and all those days I went without a steak, I was like,
for this. So you guys should have rowed a boat over to Africa instead of flying over there.
I actually tried to get our carbon offset. Like, I tried to include that, I was like, we rowed to Antigua. And Kyle wouldn't have it. He's like, well, look, like, it's not like we had to go to Antigua to do something.
Right. Fair.
So we weren't allowed to.
Joyrides don't factor.
Yeah. So I got shut down there. But yeah, so the carbon in the atmosphere was the big highlight of this. It's what we wanted to draw everyone's attention to, and we felt like we would kind of be selfish just to row across the ocean without having some like benevolent cause to anything. Like some people row for cancer, some people row for this. Well, we all care about the environment. Even the most staunch conservatives care about the environment.
Sure.
I met an old boy the other week who was like, he's like, I don't know much about the environment, but I really like the ponds and the lakes that I go fishing in. So if taking care of the environment means that like I'll have the ponds and lakes to go fish in with my kid, then I care about the environment too.
Yeah,
and so
sure.
This is more impactful to us. And being in southeastern Oklahoma, it really it's eye-opening, because a lot of people here recognize that there's a problem. They recognize that there's a problem with the environment. It's getting warmer every year. It's in the beginning of March, the cows down in Clay's land were chasing green grass. And like these old guys, these old guys are like this. We've never seen this before. We've never seen cows chasing green grass this early. And so people recognize that there's an environmental change. And, the debate is out there right now, especially every administration, has a different view on this, but what's causing it? Humans or is this just a natural progression of the environment? And, it's hard to have that discussion. I have my opinion, right?
Sure.
I mean, we can get into that. I can tell you about when I was in Antarctica, we were drilling up ice cores, and I could show you what the carbon in the atmosphere looked like from 150,000 years ago to what it looks like 150 years ago. And we can start to see that actual gradual change of where the carbon is.
Right. And not just in the span of one, old farmer's lifetime, but in the span of like geological history.
Yeah, exactly. Over the course of many, many millennia.
Yeah.
And like this is actually changing now more than it ever has in history.
Sure.
So,
or that's what the ice in Antarctica. That is what the ice in Antarctica says to us. Anyway.
Yeah.
If you want to trust those guys.
Yeah, I mean that ice was probably put there by like liberal neo-Nazis or something. Hillary.
Yes.
Edit. So there we are, carbon neutral. So we all kind of care. We all kind of care about the environment, and we thought, it's selfish of us to leave our families, to leave our jobs, to leave everything behind, to go row across the ocean without having a benevolent cause.
Sure.
And we cared about the environment, and so we decided to do this as a carbon neutral expedition, in which we would raise awareness for climate change, and we would count all our carbon, and that would be offset in the end through our own money and through the donations of our benevolent supporters.
So what, imagine you learned a lot of things from this, but like, what, if anything, was like the most surprising about this whole adventure to you, or like unexpected?
Oh man, I feel like I was pretty mentally prepared for this.
Yeah.
I mean, without spoiling too much, like I'd kind of been a glutton for punishment, like I'd really pushed myself in some hard ways. And so I was prepared for the pain, and I was prepared for a little bit of fear, and I was prepared for like the awe-inspiring force of nature. Mm-hmm. But I guess what really surprised me and what really impressed me was just seeing four guys come together, and from completely different walks of life in some respects, and coming together as a team, in some of the most austere environments the earth has. Mm-hmm. And just seeing us come together and work through problems, to support each other, to oppose each other, and to really just kind of meld in a cohesive form of teamwork. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was to me was just the most impressive part. I mean, I had a couple aha moments where I was just like, we had a lot of organizational behavior prep for this, talking about team building, talking about what about you is going to make me mad, what about me is going to make you. Yeah, exactly. Well, I knew exactly how to kill everyone on the boat. I thought about it all the time. No, so
strike three.
Eco-terrorist.
Phil the murderer. Yeah. Next time.
And next time, Breaking Bad.
That's right.
What was that? Dear John, Angry John, Dirty John, that podcast.
I haven't heard that.
Oh man, it's good.
Dirty John is the name of it?
Yeah. Anyway, I'll tell you about it later.
I'll write it down on my hand with my invisible pen.
So we did a lot of organizational behavior to kind of talk about, how we're going to overcome these problems. What about you is going to make you mad about me? Or what about me is going to make me, Antarctica. Antarctica. So we did a lot of organizational behavior training before this, like, what about me is going to make you mad? What about you is going to make me bad? How we can cope through that? What are the major stressors?
Did you guys consult with like people who had done the race before?
Yeah, a little bit. But nothing on team building.
Okay.
We all had different assets in our corner that would help us.
Sure.
I knew this one incredible woman who did a lot of it's kind of like mind-body stuff, and like I brought a lot of meditation things with me. Now, I'm not usually one that would meditate, but let me tell you, there's a few times that this really helped me get through some of these days.
I bet.
And so I felt like we were pretty prepared, and but it was still anybody's guess.
Yeah.
I mean, there have been times that I've been in pretty bad situations. I used to work as a medic for a long time, and a few years of that, I was on a tactical team called, it was a SWAT team, Emergency Task Force, up in New York. And what we talked about was people going, code black, right? You're in the yellow. You're kind of like, that's your peak performance level. Like you keep your heart rate down. Your fingers and your senses are the most adroit. When you're in the red, your heart's beating too fast. You lose, fine motor function. You're now at like gross motor function only. You're getting tunnel vision. When you go in the black, you just cognitively switch off. And there was a lot of fear about like what's going to make each one of us go code black, and what do we do if someone goes code black? Yeah. What do you do if someone goes code black? And
was that discussed because there's like that happens in these situations?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's been like murder attempts on the water,
Man.
There have been people who just completely lose their mind. And it's not always like rage and aggression. Sometimes it's just fear. Yeah. Fear will make a man do something he's never thought he could do.
Yeah.
And that's what I worried about. Like, what point do we break down? And so we talked about it, and I felt like that was a big, I think that was incredibly salient. It was important, but we can do all the talking we want, but it's not until you're on the water that you actually see what people do and what they don't do. So,
well, it's like you said, it forces you. It can make you do things that you, in that conversation, could never imagine yourself even getting to that point.
Yeah. So, we were on the water, and I think it was New Year's Eve, and we had a lot of bad luck. The first 2 weeks, we lost our auto helm within 24 hours, and that's like the electric motor that steers the rudder, that keeps the boat on track. Set of GPS coordinates that goes towards it. Burned that out right away. Waves were too rough, and then by day 3, we realized that we lost our water maker. Now we're hand pumping water. Day 4, it was like somebody just kicked a beach ball, and we were just flying to the west. We were just screaming to the west. Which is not where we wanted to go. We actually wanted to go south, like almost due south,
really?
To the trade winds. That's the key. You want to get as south as you can, get into the trade winds, and the trade winds are kind of like consistent weather, consistent winds in the same direction. And they usually go straight to Antigua. Well, here we are now, much further north, probably like 250 miles north of those, getting blasted to the west. And these winds are a lot less predictable. They're taking us north a little bit. They're taking us west, and they're not taking us south. And so we're just, and the waves, oh my gosh. So it started off, 20 knot winds on the first day. And then the next day was, 25 knot winds. The waves are at like 10 feet, 15 feet. And then the next day, the winds are at like 27, 28 knots. And then, the waves are at like 15 feet. And then the next day, they're like 30 knots, gusting to 35 knots. And the waves are at like 20 feet, 25 feet.
It's like almost as high as your boat is long.
Yeah. And so it got to the point where this just didn't end, and I just couldn't figure it out. And I was like, this can't be normal. We're talking to the race guys, right? The whatever they were, the organizers, and we're on the phone with them, the safety guys. And I'm like, what's going on with these? When are these winds gonna end? And they're just like, soon. The joke was that we'd call these guys every morning, or they'd call us every morning and tell us a whole bunch of lies, and then we'd like hang up the phone and keep rowing. And so it's like, these winds and these waves did not quit for 20 or for like over 10 days. And it was just the worst weather. And so by the end of it, by day 5, 6, 7, we're now in seas with like 30-foot waves, 35-foot waves. The winds are consistently at 30 knots, gusting to 35 and 40 knots. You're just constantly getting splashed with water, and you're just exhausted. You can't row in that.
Right.
We had to bring our oars in. The oars are on the side of the boat, and
you just try to keep from tipping. Right?
That's it. Yeah. That's all you want to do is not capsize. And so what we did is, it's hard to explain how harrowing and terrifying this is, but I'm sitting at the back of the boat, and I've got these 2 ropes in my hand. One's connected to one side of the rudder, the other's connected to the other side of the rudder, and I'm hand steering the boat. So right in front of me in the aft end of the boat are these 2 aerial antennas, and we've got a little flag, a little Spanish flag. Now we were just going to keep that up there and take it down immediately after we left the Spanish port. But what it ended up working as is like a weather vane for us. And so now I've got this weather vane, and I'm watching it. And the second the flag goes to the left, I pull on the left rudder. If the flag goes to the right, I pull on the other side, and it keeps the boat in line with the wind or the waves. The second we get off of that, now we're at risk of capsizing.
Yeah.
Because
going
if a wave,
broadside.
Yeah. So if a wave hits us broadside, it can knock us over. And so for 24 hours a day, whoever's sitting in that second rowing position is just staring at that flag. And you're just constantly making these little micro adjustments.
Right.
And it's not easy holding this thing, especially at night when you're cold and there's ropes wrapped around your hands are like just ghost white. Mm-hmm. And even though you're keeping it directly in line with the wind, the waves don't always break exactly at the aft of the boat. They'll break a little bit to the corner. So you'll be sitting there, and all of a sudden a wave will break over the corner of the boat. It floods over the boat. You're soaking wet. You're cold. You're wet, and you're just miserable.
You're still watching the flag.
And you're still watching the flag. And this just went on and on and on. And I remember at one point we were sitting in the back of the boat. And I'm sitting in the back of the boat with Brian behind me, and he's sitting there pumping water, and it's just quiet, and you can't see anything. There's no moon, right? And so it's just the black sea, and the sky is just a different hue of painful black. Mm-hmm. It's the only way I could describe it. And you can see the horizon just doing this, just up and down as you're going up and over these waves, and you're just terrified. And just imagine being in a destruction derby with a blindfold on,
blindfolded,
and just listening to the crashing waves around you. Like just one's over there, and like any minute one's coming for you. You just don't know when. And usually they'd come right at the back of the boat, smash the back of the boat, incredibly loud, or they come just kitty corner to the back of the boat, and then wash over. You get soaked, and you're just kind of continuing to sit there with cold salt water all over your body, and you keep going. And all you can think is just keep that flag straight. Don't die. And it's really a monumental responsibility to have, because you can't let go of those ropes. You can't let the boat go broadside, because if you do, you can get knocked down. You could get knocked down. You could capsize. And if someone's got their hatch open, or if someone's trying to go in and out of the hatch, then that's the end of the race. Or you could have a fatality. Yeah. And it happened. And so a lot of boats capsized. 2 boats capsized and got knocked out of the race. One had a fire. So it's a real threat.
Oh, during this storm?
During this storm.
Wow.
And so there I am sitting in the back of the boat, and I'm kind of just waiting, steering the boat. And all of a sudden I see this wave kind of rise up. And every once in a while, when you can see it start cresting at the top, you see the white, it's going to be like a big one.
The foam coming.
Yeah, the foam starts coming, and it gets close enough to you, then you can see the contrast of the white. And so you're just like, oh, here we go. And just expecting to get wet and kind of just squinting. And then all of a sudden, I just see this wall of water in the peripheral vision of my left eye. And I'm like, oh my God. And I didn't even have time to think before, I am just inundated with water. I'm holding my breath because water's on my face. And I'm like, this is really screwed up. And then I kind of come to, and I'm leaning against these 2 ropes. And along the side of the boat, we had these 2 ropes, like just tubular webbing, just to kind of balance yourself and keep people on and stuff like that. And so I'm leaning against these 2 ropes. I kind of come to, and I'm resting in the water, and the boat is completely sideways in the water. Now this water, imagine like falling out of a safari truck in the middle of the Serengeti, surrounded by lions. That's what it feels like. Yeah. You are terrified to be outside that truck because you're going to get eaten. This is like your boat is your home. It's safe. Everything's fine. The water is death. I am now lying in death.
I am scraping death.
I am terrified. I'm just like, I'm like looking at it. The side of the boat, the gunnel of the boat is just completely submerged in water. And I'm like, oh my God, we're like tipping over. And we just stayed like that. And all I can think is, I got to get the ropes. I got to steer the boat. If I don't steer the boat, we're going to go broadside to the waves and get knocked down. It's just all I can think about. So I lunge back up, like scrambling up the boat, trying to grab onto these ropes again. I can't find them because they've been knocked out of my hands. For the rudder. Yeah, for the rudder. And so I'm like scrambling for them. Behind me, Brian, he's like, yes, this is amazing. We're going to survive. We're going to be fine. And I'm like,
It's like
shut up.
What's his name? Captain Lieutenant Dan.
Lieutenant Dan,
screaming at God on top of the.
You can't kill me.
Yeah.
And so I think so. It was just a nervous reaction from his part. He's just like, we are gonna survive, and I'm thinking, all right. So I get back and I finally find the ropes. I have to reach up to these two little pulleys that they're attached to, and I grab them, run them through my fingers, and I get back in my seat. Flag's completely sideways now, and I'm thinking I got to steer the boat to get this thing back straight with the waves again. Jeez. And then the boat starts listing slowly back to neutral again, and I'm like, the area we sit in, like the rowing channel there, it's like 1.5 feet deep, just completely full of water.
Right.
Water is pouring off the boat. Water was up to like the halfway up the hatch on the boat. Brian's still screaming, and he's like, yeah. And he's like, oh, we're great, we're gonna be fine. And I'm like, yep. Maybe. We don't know yet. Let's figure this one out. And then the boat is designed to self-right, and so it slowly self-righted back.
Yeah.
And then we recovered, and I got the boat straight again, and then I joined Brian in our jubilant celebration and survival.
We are gonna survive
of our first knockdown, and that was a knockdown. When a wave just hits you from the side, it's like a rogue wave, just blasts you from the side and knocks your boat all the way over. It didn't capsize, but we almost did. And we're strapped in. We've got climbing harnesses, around our waists, and we've got a 3-point harness connected to us to these stanchions. And so if you do get knocked off the boat, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to stay with the boat. If you get separated from the boat, you're dead. You are dead. In that storm, you're dead. It happened in 2014 or 15 or 16. It happened. A kid fell off his boat, and he had a strap around he had an ankle strap on his ankle for like a surfboard leash. Mm-hmm. Just snapped, just drifted away, disappeared. The boat can't turn around.
Yeah.
The boat can't stop.
Right.
And especially at night, you are just gone. So you have to think about that. And here we are, just trying to hypothesize what would happen if the boat actually did a full 180 and we're upside down underwater.
Right.
It really is like a terrifying thing, especially at night, So
like pitch black.
Yeah. So that was, I don't know what day that was, 6, 7, something like that. I mean, it's still the first week. It's still the first week.
Welcome to the ocean, boys.
We're like not even like 500 miles across the ocean yet. And every day you're exhausted, you're hungry, you're tired, you're scared, you're cold, you're wet. Like everything that you don't want to ever be. Everything that's like opposite of how we feel right now is like how I was on the water.
Right.
And you're just like, oh,
here are the things that make us comfortable as humans. Let's eschew all of them at once. So like how many days did it take to get past that point where you no longer were like, I wonder if we should turn back?
Like that was minute 1, really.
Yeah.
I mean, like there was no turning back. You just can't. Even when you can't physically.
Your guts up,
oh yeah, you physically can't turn the boat around.
Sure.
So with the wind, I mean, unless there's zero wind, which there never was, the boat is designed to always go with the wind. Now it won't like go perfectly with the wind. It'll obviously go at like a 30-degree angle, and that's why we risked getting capsized.
Right. Yeah.
But
that's why you have a rudder.
You just can't turn around though. Man. It's happening. You were on that boat.
Right.
There was 2 support boats, and what they usually did is they stayed with the pack a little bit, but as the pack quickly dispersed, because you had guys rowing in 4s on fast boats, and you guys on, singles, solos. Imagine if I'm crazy. Imagine the solo that did this. And
what was his name? C6.
C6 Steve tried to do it solo, no avail.
So how many teams to begin?
I think there was 25.
And by the time, I mean, how far does that spread out?
Pretty fast. It spreads out. I mean, the fastest boat was 30 days. The slowest boat was like 67 days or something. Yeah.
So just the lengthways is just like stretching depending on the speed of the boat.
And it happens pretty quick. So
I mean, like, are you guys like, is the direction pretty much the same for everybody just because of the winds?
Yeah. I mean, some people try some different things, and some people catch different winds, and they're able to go further south or whatever.
Did anybody catch that, or was everyone?
One team got it.
Got it.
Yeah, lucky bastards.
Everyone else was in the westward gale with you.
Everybody got killed by it. And so, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say it was a pretty bad weather. The this was the worst weather they'd seen in the race history.
Wow.
I mean, so we really just took it in the chin. I mean, there was no luck to be had. And, but so these times were really stressful, and everybody was dealing with the stress in different ways. But it was just kind of like, you just got to keep going, like when you're going through hell, you just got to keep going. Yeah. And that's what we did.
Especially when you can literally not turn around.
Yeah, right. So there was 2 race support boats. We saw one once, and they purposely came near us to say hey, what's up? And
these guys still alive?
Took pictures of us. They got some good photos too.
Cool. Hey, pause, and now we'll show a photo. You'll send it to me, and I'll show it now. Great. Hey, everyone, it's on the screen now. Great.
Nice. I can show it to you now if you want to see it.
Yeah, let's see it.
So
this is taken from the support ship. You said
support ship, yeah.
Oh, okay, so this is the Layla.
Yeah, this is Layla.
That is
And this is this is like a calmer day too.
Dang, man.
Yeah. I mean, you see like what I mean. So you're down here. This is probably only like a 15 to 20 foot wave. And so when you're getting hit with a cresting 25, 30 foot wave, see they crest.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we can see. So that's one that's cresting on us. It's the evening of day 5. It's actually like 4 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. Long 4-hour shift on the rudder last night. We're still just hand steering through these really heavy waves. That's happens once in a while.
Golly.
So that is what one of those waves breaking in the back of the boat. That's what that sounds like.
Man. All right, so
what were we talking about?
I don't know. You're going to tell me something about the food. Or your relationship with the food.
I just couldn't eat like the first few days.
Right.
I was puking so much. Like I'd put food in my mouth, and I would I might have journals of me being like, oh, I ate 2 apricots today. I'm really excited, give myself pats on the back, and then I'd puke them up like 5 minutes later,
right.
And so it got to the point where I'd like put food in my mouth and I'd just throw it right up. So I just stopped eating, and I was snacking on, like, we had some crackers and protein bars,
right.
whatever, just stuff to subsist. But and then we hit the storm, and it was like the first day and then the second day, and I was always cold. And I was always under stress holding the rudder, and after a while, you just get used to that. And for me, when I get really stressed, I don't eat. Some people stress eat. Well, I stress not eat, and so I'm not there eating. And it was day 3, then day 4, then day 5. Next thing you know, it's like 10 days into it, and I still haven't had like a solid meal. I had like one, I had one meal where I sat down and I ate, and then I couldn't focus, and I didn't want to eat. And then it got like, 2 weeks in, 2.5 weeks in, and I start saying something to the guys. I'm just like, I haven't eaten much yet, And they're like, how are you not eating? You need to eat. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I'm still rowing. I'm still strong. So just shut up. Yeah. Shut up. Mind your business.
That's right.
And then I got to like the 3rd week, and now the guys are starting to really take notice, and they're starting to get really upset. They're like, you need to eat. Like, if you don't eat, you'll fall out. And I was like, obviously I want to eat,
right?
Like, I don't want to be hungry, but I'm just not physically hungry. And I would snack on, like crackers, or I'd snack on whatever. I subsisted on like dried fruits and water, and this is a race where you're using about 5,500 calories a day or more. You're at a calorie deficit the entire time, anyways.
Even at 5,500.
Even when you're eating.
Yeah.
And so now I'm not eating. And because I'm cold, like I'm burning up more calories that way. So it just got really bad. And I remember one time Kyle was like, Phil, you just need to eat. You can't not eat. And he never gets mad. And so when he got mad at me, and he's like trying to make me eat a protein bar, and I'm putting it in my mouth, and I just immediately throw up, and I'm like, is this what you want? Is this what you want? You don't think I don't want to eat? It was drama on the high seas, man. And we laugh about it now, but it was a real problem.
Yeah.
Like, how am I not eating? And the thing is, I would sit there and fantasize about food too. I would sit there, I can't wait to get back to DC and eat this hamburger at this place, or the breakfast burrito at that place,
Right.
and like I just can't wait for all this stuff. And I'm like, here I am not eating on the water, and the dehydrated food I was telling you about, I used to really like it, and like the sweet and sour chicken, was one of my favorites. And so I remember I made it. Someone made me the sweet and sour chicken. They're like, just eat this. Like, okay, all right. And I take a spoon and I put it in my mouth and I just instantly throw up. And I'm like, oh my God.
Something's wrong.
Something's so wrong. Like, what's wrong with me? And it got to the point where it's just like, I gotta just keep going until I fall out. And then the guys will have to figure out what to do with me then. And I don't know. It was nerve-wracking. Physically, I was still rowing. I was still strong.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, cognitively, I was still there. I was as cognitive as you can be, when you're on
Right.
2 hours of sleep at a time. And so I remember it was like week 3.5 or something. And Kyle, maybe it was almost week 4. Kyle goes, oh, there's this wet food ration we have. And the wet food ration is the emergency ration. It's the stuff that if our water maker fails, which it did, then we eat the wet food ration because you don't need to reconstitute it with water. And so he goes, there's a English breakfast, because I would tell Kyle and James like, oh, what I love about the UK the most is an English breakfast, with like the beans and like the sausage links and all that stuff. And he goes, there's an English breakfast, whatever. And I was just like, maybe I'll take a look. But it was already so much contention because the guys are like trying to force feed me, and I'm like,
Right.
I'm like, don't do this to me. Don't treat me like a child. I can handle this,
Right.
even though I clearly couldn't.
Right.
And so I go in the cabin, and all of a sudden there's this. I opened up this packet, and there's the smell of the beans, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna trial. This is a trial period, and I'm like, eating outside the cabin. Because I just assume I'm going to put it in my mouth, I'm going to throw
Throw up everywhere.
And then, I just kind of like close my eyes. I did a little bit of meditation before. And I just started eating it. And I was like, oh, these beans are so delicious. And I just started shoveling the food in my mouth. And I started eating it again. And I was able to maintain on like the candy bars, the crackers, the fruit, and these wet rations, which I eat about like one a day, and they're only 400 calories.
Man.
And so I was usually subsisting on, for a time there, I was only subsisting on like, 300 calories a day, in the hardest part of the race, the wind and the waves and, rowing.
Yeah.
And now
So
I'm
you're-
subsisting on about 1,500 calories a day. And it's still an arduous expedition in which I'm burning 6,000 calories. And so, it just went on like that for the entirety. And I remember we started getting close to shore, and I started running out of the wet food rations, and I'm like, I don't care. Like, I'm just going to keep going. Like,
Right.
run out, we run out. And I got to shore, and after all the celebration and everything, I remember first thing I said, before I even touch a drop of food, I want to weigh myself. And I weighed myself. They had a scale there, and I weighed, I forget exactly how much I weighed, but I was 33 pounds less.
In 45 days.
Yeah. So I was 33 pounds in 45 days.
Golly.
It's called the pain and suffering diet.
Pain and suffering diet.
So I lost a lot.
And this can be yours
Yeah.
for a low price.
Of $100,000
Golly,
to
man.
row across the ocean.
Okay. So
Gosh.
you rowed across the ocean as a weight loss plan.
It's a weight
apparently.
loss plan.
Yeah.
And you were asking earlier about like times that that really surprised me, and it really was just seeing us come together as a team. And I'd already gone over the different things on like team dynamics, organizational behavior, whatever, and all you can do to prepare for it. The stressful time in which Brian and I had a knockdown. Brian and I had 2 more knockdowns. Well, they actually happened at the same time, so we got knocked down. Same thing, middle of the night. This doesn't happen during the day like it should.
Right.
Happened middle of the night, and then and then I'm again against the ropes, and now we're prepared. We're like, we know what's happening.
That's right.
And then a second wave comes, and we're like, now we don't know what's happening. Like,
New experience. New experience.
this is really scary. And
She's still screaming, we're going to make it.
we're fine. This is great. Maybe. And so, so we get through all this, and and a little bit later, Kyle and I were on the deck, and I'm sitting in the forward rowing position, And I'm not rowing because the waves are so big. So I'm just kind of sitting there, just kind of like observing and keeping Kyle company. Really can't do anything, you know. We had water, so I didn't need to pump. It was just kind of weird. And he's sitting in the back of the boat steering. And so, you know, the waves are really big. This is like those days where it was kind of like 30 and 40 feet. And I remember just seeing this one, and I showed you the picture of the wave cresting behind the boat and kind of like anticipate it. Well, we kind of go up this one, and, you know, our necks are craning looking up at this wave. And then we're like, ooh, this is going to be a big one. And then we see the wave start curling, and we go, oh, it's going to be really big, as in it's going to break at the back of the boat. And when it breaks at the back of the boat, that's just like kicking a beach ball. You are just sailing. And it can pick the boat's speed up. And I mean, the beginning of the race, we'd be like, oh my gosh, you know, we were doing 5 knots, 6 knots, 7 knots. Now, and there's a juxtaposition. A slow day, you'd be doing like 1.5 knots. A fast day, you'd be doing 3 knots. Like that's a really good pace. Most days we were around 2.5 knots. And so like 5 knots is fast.
What is that in like
1.1 miles per hour?
a knot?
Yeah, so 1 knot is 1.1. Okay. So, you know, 3 knots is 3.3 miles an hour.
Got it.
And so we were always excited when we'd pick up some speed. And so we're sitting at the back of the boat. We see this wave rising up in the sky, and then we see the wave start curling. And I'm kind of just, you know, sitting back in my seat getting ready for this thing. And Kyle's kind of like tensing up, grabbing in the ropes. And this thing broke perfectly. The wave crested and curled right into the back of the boat, and it just smashed us. So much so that I remember it kind of like pushing me forward, and I'm like, and we just
like you were kicked or something.
And Kyle is like 6 knots, 7 knots, 9 knots, 10 knots, 10.6 knots, and we are just like jubilant, screaming, arms in the air. We're surfing down this wave, and he's holding the ropes, screaming our speed out like it's like he's an announcer, like some race, you know, and he's like a sportscaster, and we're just like, yeah, we're screaming, we're like arms in the air. The guys stick their heads out, they're like, that was really fast, and we're like, holy cow. And then everything kind of calms down as the wave goes by us, and then I look behind the boat and I go, wow, this is really great. Hey, what's all that stuff floating in the water? Did something fall off the boat? And then we both kind of had this aha moment, like, no, that's part of the boat. And we're like, oh my God, what just happened? And sure as hell, what happened was we have 2 dagger boards, which are like keels. They keep the boat going straight with the waves. Well, the force of the water was so strong that it sheared off one of our dagger boards.
Dang.
It just ripped it right off the water line. We're like, this is bad. This is really bad. We only have one of those left, and then our rudder is made of the same thing. So like, you know, you can lose a dagger board, but you can't lose the rudder.
Right.
There are 3 things that end a expedition. First is the water maker, which we already lost.
Right.
The second is the rudder, which we're getting close to losing, and the third is the team breaking down. Yeah. And so we're just like, all right, you know, can't let that happen again. Well, now it's New Year's Eve. We're kind of excited, you know, that it's gonna turn to midnight our time. And so we're just like, oh, you know, 2018, here we come. We've gotten through a lot of these rough storms, you know.
How many days in are you at this point?
14 minus New Year's Eve, so like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. And so we've just endured a lot as a team, and we're like really just kind of like happy to be pushing on, you know, surviving what we did. You know, we're down to 1 dagger board in our rudder, and it's not particularly bad out. And so I remember it's 11:50 p.m. James has got a couple bottles of champagne, small bottles of champagne. We're gonna have a little celebration, team celebration, as we cross the line into 2018, and the most innocuous wave hit us. It was the most innocuous thing that would ever rise out of the water and bump into us. It was just like bloop, splash. And I don't know what it was about that wave at that particular moment, but all of a sudden I start hearing cracking and crunching below me, and I'm thinking, no, oh my God, no, this can't be happening. And then all of a sudden the boat is a lot more wobbly and unstable, and Kyle's like, oh my God, we just lost our second dagger board. And so, you know, we're like, this can't be happening. I'm like pulling out the little levers, trying to pull it up, and sure as heck, there's a dagger board sheared off at the water line, and we're just
from a little bump,
just ripped it right in half. And and it's just about to turn,
Crack open the champagne.
yeah, it's just about to like roll into 2018, and then like all of a sudden, it was like all the stress that we'd been enduring for the past 2.5, 3 weeks or whatever it was, just fell apart. Just like the spaghetti fell out of the bag, and we just started like going at it as a team. People were like trying to come up with ideas. People were really stressed. We're like starting to raise our voices at each other. We're starting to like doubt each other, doubt our boat. Now it's like, this is an existential threat. Like if we lose that rudder, we can't steer the boat and you can't keep going. I mean, you literally have to call it quits. And 2 years of planning,
right.
$100,000, of money down the drain. And we're just like, this is the worst. And we just had about a 2-hour team meltdown. And it went from like the stages of death and dying,
right.
Like, it like started off with like anger, and then it started with bargaining, and then it was, depression. And then finally, like in the end, it was acceptance. And it was really one of those moments where like in retrospect, I look back and I say, this was the storming and norming, like we had our storming, like literally and figuratively. And then we had our norming. Like that was like now what like was happening. And like, this is like the reality of the situation. And we just have to like accept it and move on. And then from that point on, we started performing. And it was really just fascinating to see the guys come together. And everybody had ideas, right? Like, oh, if we lose our rudder, then we'll do this. We'll drop the para anchor. Then we'll fashion a new rudder out of this thing, and we'll do this and that. And like, just to see everybody be creative, and everybody had the can-do, problem-solving mentality. There was never like we'll just have to give up,
right?
Or we'll just have to call the support boat to come get us in 3 days, or we'll hail an emergency and get picked up by a freighter. It was never that.
Yeah, it's like the point where you go from where a new problem is like one more like straw towards breaking the camel's back, to the point where one more problem, it's just like strengthening the resolve at that point.
Yeah, it's just like, what else do you got, Ocean?
Yeah, right.
Bring it, And so the resolve was always there. And I mean, for me, I always look at challenges as opportunities. I don't see them as problems.
Sure.
And that's how every time I looked at this, I never once said I'm gonna quit, or like this would be the end of us. Now, even when another team they capsized and they had a fire and they lost their electrics, I thought in my head, if we have a capsize and we lose our electrics or something like that, is that really the end of us? Do we really have to give up?
Yeah.
And I don't think so, because we're moving the boat with our own arms. We don't have an electric motor, and we're going to go west.
Right.
Like the winds and the waves are going to take us that way, and it's going to take us within 100 miles of Antigua. And we have a tiny little solar charger, and we can charge our satellite phone. And I guess that's all we really need, in emergencies.
Yeah.
The rest, I'm going to do on my own. I'm not going to quit. I even had the discussion with the guys in the beginning. If one of us dies, which can happen, would you guys keep going? And then they were kind of like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, if I die, I will haunt you forever if you don't finish this race. And the race committee, they're just saying, like, oh, if you guys have a death or there's someone falls overboard, that's it. The race is over for you. Make me.
That's right.
Come and get me. Like, tell me I have to quit.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. So we really just had this moment, like we had a couple ahas, and it was that and another where we kind of got blown north by the wind, and we had to put out what's called a para anchor. Essentially, it's just looks like a parachute. It floats in the water, stops you from drifting at the speed of the wind. You drift at the speed of the ocean currents, and it slows you down. And we were going north. You can't row. You can't do anything. You just sit there floating north, which is the most dejected, horrible feeling you can ever imagine. Like going the opposite, especially when it's so hard to make up that time.
Right.
And we floated for about 18 hours, and then after that, the winds kind of went back in our favor, and we said, "This is it. This is the push. This is the 20-day push. If we row this many, knots per hour, this many knots per day, for this many days, we will get there in 20 days." And then we just had that mentality, like envision success, and that's what we did. And
you made it.
And it just started to get normal after that. And that was the performing, like yes, we had some different storms and we had good days and we had bad days, but like nothing could have been bad as that first 10 days and 12 or 14 days in the water, during the storm, during the nausea, during the equipment breakages, like all these things that went wrong. We lost our electrics. We lost our, our battery solar panel wouldn't charge. We lost our water maker, like all these things were just trying to stop us. And we're just like, no, not happening. We're going to keep going.
I'm going to get to that hamburger.
Yeah, that hamburger's calling my name.
So you got to shore, you scarfed.
Yeah.
What else did you make up for? Just like a shower? Like what was the best part of like being on land again?
Yeah. I mean, I had a friend come down from DC and she's an incredible cook, and I told her all I want is a shower, ice,
yeah,
and a big English breakfast. And so I went to she carried me home and put me in bed, and she said that I slept like this for like 14 hours.
Like you were in the
straight.
cabin.
Like I was in my cabin again, just like straight, arms down to the side, and I didn't move. And I just slept like that.
Wake up screaming, "We're going broadside."
Funny enough, that happens. And then I woke up and I ate the most delicious breakfast, and that was really what I craved. A good night's sleep, ice, like just a good whiskey, just like a nice whiskey with a big rock, a big rock of ice,
of actual ice,
yeah,
like frozen water.
Because nothing was cold in the water.
Sure,
everything was
except for
like,
you.
Yeah. So like everything was just the same temperature. Like every bottle of water you drink, imagine that, like just lukewarm. And it got to the point where we didn't want to heat our food because it was such a pain in the butt to like get out the stove, put water in it,
right,
boil it up. In fact, we stopped heating water like by the third or fourth day. We just stopped having warm food.
Never mind. This is not worth it.
Yeah, it's just so much extra labor.
Golly.
So you row, right? You row for an hour. You take like a 5-minute break, and then you row for another hour. You get off, crawl in the cabin. Guy, replaces you. You get in there. The first thing you do is get off all your horrible wet stuff, right? And most of the time, except when it was really cold and wet in the beginning, I had like, the oil skins on. But most of the time, I just rode in like lycra underwear and my thick jacket. And so I pull this off, get all my clothes off, and you take a wet wipe and you wipe down your face, your neck, your underarms, everything that would collect salt. Salt sores become a real problem, in which they did.
I bet.
And you wipe down your naughty bits, make sure you don't get any problems, and then you try to eat. And now you're at like 1 hour and 45 minutes, right? And you're thinking, I am so tired.
Right.
Like anything.
Am I going to spend time cooking or like heating this up?
Yeah, which is another reason why I didn't eat very well in the beginning. So, now you're like eating as fast as you can. So you're taking your spoon, you're just like,
right,
just shoveling food in, and then you just want to fall asleep.
Yeah.
And then so you go to bed, and then you wake up, an hour and 20 minutes, 25, 30 minutes later to a
right.
And like
your
you're
turn.
up and you're just like, no, this can't be happening. Like in the middle of the night, it's like 4:00 in the morning, and all you want to do is just lay down, and then it's just like,
right.
Oh God,
only 44 more days of this.
Yeah. So in the beginning, we had the really stressful waves and the winds,
right?
And like I told you, I was just holding on these ropes, staring at this flag, destruction derby waves around me. You can't see anything. You're cold. You're wet. And when these waves would break in the back of the boat, it would just sound like an elephant kicking in the door. And even in calm seas, the waves lapping against the side of the boat is amplified.
Slapping noises.
Yeah, it's like amplified inside this like carbon fiber shell.
Right.
And so you're never devoid of noise. And so you'd be laying there, and this happened to a lot of us a handful of times. It happened to all four of us a lot of times. And I'd be laying there, I'd be dead asleep, and I would wake up in a terror. Now we use sunshades, and we had the port in the top and the door. And to keep the light from shining out and blinding the guys, we put sunshade in. It also keeps the light from shining in and cooking the cabin. So there's just no light at night. It's just pitch black. I mean, like you can't see your hand in front of your face. And so I'd be laying there and I'd wake up in a terror and go, the boat's going broadside, the boat's going broadside. And I'd start reaching forward. I'd start grabbing.
Reaching for the ropes.
Reaching for the ropes. I can't find the ropes. And I'm like, grabbing left. And I'm like so hard that I'm like starting to cut my fingers. And my fingers are bleeding from like slapping the side of the boat. Uh-huh. And finally, after like 10 seconds, I go, okay, I'm not on the deck. I'm in my cabin, and then, and I'd be like, yeah, I'd open the door. I'd be like, guys, and they'd be like, go back to bed. And like, okay. Or
okay,
I'd wake
we're
up,
not dying.
I'd wake up in a terror and I'd open the door. I'd go, we're going broadside. And they'd be like, no, we're not. And I'm like, okay. And I just go back to sleep. And so like, you're never getting a good night's rest.
Right.
You're always like just waking up in panics.
Yeah.
James was always hallucinating. Like he'd wake up, like there's frogs on the deck. Get the frogs off. Kyle would wake up in a terror a handful of times. He'd be like, the rudder broke off. And he'd stick his head out the cabin. We're like, shut the hatch. Like there's waves crashing,
right.
man. The rudder's fine. But he's just terrified the rudder's going to break. Brian thought he was getting buried in a cabin.
Oh, man.
Or, he's getting buried in a coffin. He's like, don't bury me alive. Don't bury me alive.
Jeez.
Like the stress.
So you just get used to like consoling each other as you come out of the hatch screaming.
Right? Like just management. Yeah. Like we were all learning how to manage James because it would take him the longest to kind of like become aware of his
snap
situation.
Out of that. Yeah.
And so sometimes he would just like, have these crazy talk in his sleep and stuff like that. No, it was stressful. It's a lot.
Well, we talked a lot about a boat today. And, we'll probably talk about it more. I think we're going to have to continue this on another episode. So if you'll promise to come back and talk some more, I'll promise to film you and put you on the internet.
Okay.
And ask you questions.
Well, originally the promise was that we'd be doing this with beers, and that never happened.
Let's go grab a beer.
Yeah,
Cool.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Well, the road to the next hour and a half is paved with beer.
Okay.
So,
been a pleasure.
Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
And we'll see you on another episode of No Express Purpose.
No Express Purpose.